Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to film a video talking about some of the goals that I've set up for myself for the rest of the year. Some of these goals are actually specific books I'd like to read, and some of these goals are more like conceptual or like open-ended. So looking at my list, I only have 8 goals, but I think some of them are challenging enough but not hard enough that I can't do it. So the first goal I want to talk about is to read a specific book, and that is the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. The reason I have this specific book, or I'm just starting the series in general, is because one, I know that it's going to be adapted pretty soon, but also I've seen so many like fantasy readers in general with various like fantasy tastes talk about how much they love the series. I know next to nothing about this series. All I know is that each book is like really long, and there's like 13 to 15 installments, but something tells me, because of the length of this book, that the story itself is not super straightforward. One thing I've been enjoying in fantasy a lot is to read books with multiple layers, nuances, a lot of characters. I do actually have the book, so I just need to pick it up and read it. So the next goal that I have for myself is to continue on with Leigh Bardugo's whole like Grisha universe, specifically like the original trilogy and then the Six of Crows duology. I think everyone knows that this series is being adapted. Everyone on Twitter and like Instagram went crazy when Leigh Bardugo announced that her books are getting adapted. So I've actually read the first book in the Grisha trilogy, Shadow and Bone, and I did enjoy it. I thought, for what it was worth, it was really entertaining. It was tropian compared to like the fantasy that's being written right now. Yeah, it doesn't really like hold up in terms of like quality, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. I'm pretty sure my library actually has all the books in this series, so yeah, I have no excuse to not pick it up. They're pretty quick reads, so I'm probably going to end up rereading the first book just because, one, I don't really remember a lot. I don't really remember the characters. I remember the Darkling just because like everyone talks about him. So much discussion about the original trilogy has jump-started because of the adaptation announcement. I'd like to see if my opinions on this series kind of align with the people who've read the series before and like have their own takes on it, especially regarding like Mal and the Darkling. I think that's kind of where a lot of discourse happens, just because I think a lot of people just don't like either character. It kind of feels like the opposite with like Twilight, where there was like a Team Edward, Team Jacob. I feel like more so now people are kind of don't like either Mal or the Darkling. If I remember about my first read, or my only read of this book, is that Mal was boring and the Darkling was kind of like typical tropey like bad boy love interest. So moving on, the next thing on my list is to read something Tolkien. I've never read anything Tolkien. I've seen the films. I am by no means like a fantasy purist. Read whatever fantasy you want. If you never want to read Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or whatever. But for me, as someone who really enjoys fantasy as a genre in film, television, video games, manga, graphic novels, literature, obviously, I kind of want to like pay my literary respect to the series, the man who kind of shaped fantasy to what it is now. I don't know what else to say on that. If you are an avid like Tolkien fan, please tell me where I should start first. The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, somewhere else. So at this point in the list, I'm going to be talking about like more like open-ended goals. So the first one, technically the fourth in this like entire list, is to read more chunky books in general. So you can't see, but my whole like bottom shelves, like at the very bottom, are like first books in a series, and they're all like super chunky, and I just haven't picked up most of them. For a while now, I've been really into like urban like fantasy paranormal type stuff, and those typically aren't quite big since the setting is pretty familiar to the reader. Ideally, I like to read like one 500-page-ish book a month. Obviously, like The Eye of the World, for example, would complete this like goal. Another goal that I'm setting up for myself is to read more classics. For some reason, classics don't really call out to me, despite the fact that their plots itself might actually be interesting. For some reason, like the label of classic on a book kind of just like turns me off. I'm not sure why. Maybe you guys can relate to that. I do actually have like a little cubicle right here of some classics that I have read either for school and stuff, but like most of these I haven't. So the next thing I have on my list is to read more historical fiction. So I don't actively look for books that are set in a historical period, but when I do, I almost always love it more so. Like they always tend to be like 5 stars for me, just because the amount of effort that the author puts in on like setting the scene. Like I appreciate that so much as a person who like studied history in college, and that's where I have my degree. You would think I'd pick it up more, but I don't, because I'm lazy. Like, I don't know. And I'm honestly, like, not super, like, picky about periods in general. The only period that I don't, like, care to read about is, like, World War II or whatever. Like, been there, done that. So the next, like, goal on my goals list is to finish a series or catch up with a series per month. And that's it's pretty self-explanatory, but, like, I don't know why I just, like, never finish series. I'm, like, bad. I'm a bad reader. I think the thing for me is when I, like, buy books, I tend to buy the first in the series just to, like, test it out and see if it's, like, for me. But, like, most of the time I end up, like, keeping the book and, like, enjoying it, like, giving it, like, minimum 3 stars. And I'll tell myself I'll continue on the series when I get, like, the whole set, so I don't have to, like, wait. But then I never, like, actually continue whether or not I get, like, the entirety of the series. I just, like, procrastinate, like, at everything in life, you know? And the last thing on my list is to read more hard-hitting contemporaries. I have recently had a, like, discussion with myself that I really enjoy crying while reading a book. So I read a lot of fantasy, and I very rarely read anything contemporary. But when I do, it tends to just be, like, romance, but, like, cheesy romances, because at that point I can be like, yeah, the romance was kind of ridiculous, but that, you know, it's, like, a cheesy romance, like, that's what I was expecting. But when I pick up, like, contemporaries in general that, like, the plot itself sounds interesting, I'm always kind of turned off by, like, the romance, because I'm, like, super critical of romances, because that's, like, the only thing I can validly critique. But, like, when it comes to the romance, I can, like, give my 2 cents and be like, yeah, this romantic lead piece of I don't like him. Why should our character like him? I don't like the book now. You know what I mean? Like, that's, like, the only place I can, like, be super, like, critical, like a critical bitch. That's kind of my hesitation when I read, like, contemporaries, because there's almost always going to be some sort of romance that I don't like. Also, at the same time, like, hard-hitting contemporaries typically, like, discuss topics that make me uncomfortable, that make people uncomfortable, and I don't like being uncomfortable, but that's, like, the point. If it was a comfortable subject, like, everyone would be like, yeah, I want to read stuff about, you know, terrible stuff. So that's my list. Nothing super unachievable. I can complete everything on this list. So what we've learned today is that I buy into the hype a lot. I'm lazy. I procrastinate. I hate romance. And I like to cry. Thank you so much for watching. I'll link my socials down below. And I'll see you sometime soon. Maybe?